Hello, and welcome to this celebration of nature writing. I'm Amanda Tuke. I'm a nature writer, botanist and birder based in suburban South London, and I'm joined today by Vanessa Wright. Back in March 2021, I was really pleased to be awarded an Arts Council England grant to be nature writer in residence in the Great North Wood in partnership with the London Wildlife Trust. The Great North Wood is a historic woodland that gradually became fragmented by development of South London's suburbs. Sitting here in my house on the Sydenham Hill Ridge, I'm within the footprint of that wood. Once stretching for several miles between Deptford and Croydon, today the wood consists of small woodland patches, parks, cemeteries, sports grounds, railway embankments and gardens, all of which provide a home for urban nature. And thankfully, a number of them are managed and nurtured by the London Wildlife Trust. Over my residency, I've visited some of the remaining fragments of the Great North Wood and written about the nature I found there. I've also led a series of online nature writing workshops to support and encourage new nature writers. In the workshops, we have focused on the idea of writing what I call thumbnail nature, which is a piece of around 40 to 50 words about experiencing the natural world. You'll be hearing some of the workshop participants reading their thumbnail nature later on. But before that, I'm going to read you 3 short pieces of my writing, inspired by the nature of the Great North Wood. Dancers in a woodland clearing, spar wood and lawns. I can't help but admire the ancient oak's sumptuous hips, frozen mid-sway. For just a moment I can consider climbing it. Perhaps I'd glimpse the view south, between the houses which jostle impatiently on this suburban wood's boundary, but I suspect it would be disappointing. This is probably the oldest remaining oak in the Great North Wood, which, despite its name, once covered much of the high ground of South London. This is Selhurst, and its name means dwelling on a wooded hill, but now denotes a fairly tree-poor suburb of Croydon, best known for its football ground, home of the Eagles. Little of the ancient wood remains. The survival of this crescent-shaped remnant north of Selhurst is thanks to a protective covenant. In a bramble patch below the tree, an eye-catching rhythmic dance is underway. A pair of tiny moths are displaying vertically, up, up, and then down again, slicing through slender shafts of morning sunlight. These are male yellow-barred longhorns, and when they pause on a leaf, I can see their striking chestnut and ochre wings and dramatic antennae, more than 6 times their body length. The dance mesmerizes me, but doesn't seem to have attracted the audience of female moths it was laid on for. Leaving the oaken dancers behind, I follow the hogweed-lined path around the crescent's curve and emerge onto a rough-cut lawn. A lone man listens to music at a picnic bench while his dog explores. 190 years ago, this was the site of a pleasure garden with a popular spa. Johann Strauss Sr. conducted his waltz band here as high society tried the new dance craze. When the re-erected Crystal Palace opened nearby in 1854, this garden's popularity faded, and the spa's iron-rich spring was finally covered over. Nobody's waltzing today, but as I stand on the memorial stone marking the site of the spring, the natural acoustics of the space amplify the dog owner's tinny phone music. This precious woodland and lawn have witnessed dance crazes come and go, but the courtship dance of tiny insects in the nearby wood never goes out of fashion. Woman on the Verge, Crescentwood Road. I'm standing with my camera in the middle of a quiet road which runs alongside Sydenham Hill Wood. In front of me is a curving triangular verge of about 10 square metres, filling the space between a low wall and a pavement corner. Beyond the wall is a protected meadow in front of a block of flats. It's protected because a rare plant, corky-fruited water dropwort, grows here. The verge itself is not particularly unique. It has a small ornamental cherry tree in the centre, a stone waymarker, and a metal post marking the boundary of the old Camberwell parish. Oh, and there's one of those lovely plastic road gritting bins too. One hot August day last year, I walked by this verge and stopped in horror when I saw that it had been mown to about a centimetre high. Only bare earth and dead grass was left. Clearly there are some verges which, if left long, reduce visibility and traffic safety, but not this one. So I sent a photo of the brown verge to the council and asked if I could adopt it and manage it to promote diversity. No reply. Understandably, I suppose. Then in September, I tried my local councillor, who also happens to be the cabinet member for the environment. Still no reply. Less understandable. I was expecting at the very least a polite brush-off. So finally in October, I made a formal complaint about the verge's management. A highways team manager swiftly responded, as I guessed he would, and agreed finally that the patch could be allowed to run wild going forward. Today, 7 months on, the verge is full of colour, with creamy white sprays of water dropwort, red dead nettle, yellow sow thistle, pink cranesbill, and blue speedwell. I've written a list on a board of all the flowers I can see and grasses, and have attached it to the tree support with a thank you to the council. I'm feeling rather pleased with myself as I take a photo. A neighbour walks past and asks what I'm doing. I explain. But where are the flowers? He asks. And I point out that as they are wildflowers, most are quite small and quite subtle. He looks sceptical as he leaves. I'm learning complacency is never a good idea. Perhaps he's off to make a complaint to the council. And then finally, a tease of hair streaks, Sydenham Hill Wood. It feels like cheating, but as I'm hoping for some action, I make straight for one of the buddleia bushes in this suburban wood. Today is the last day of the big butterfly count. As citizen science projects go, this is one of the more relaxing ones. The task is to either walk or stay in one place and record the butterflies and moths you see for 15 minutes. The woods are busy today, so I've decided on the staying put option. Buddleia's strong scent and mauve mini trumpet flowers with orange eyes are a big attraction for butterflies. Usually. I watch for the allotted time and there's not even a glimpse of a butterfly. Frankly, I'm not a fan of the plant anyway. It's invasive and it's clearly not even pulling its weight here. As I loiter on the side of the path, 2 men walk past, and one asks if my name's Sue. He seems quite put out when I smile and say no. I find myself apologising without entirely knowing why, and decide it's a good time to move on. In a sunny glade to the side of the old rail bed, I start a new count. and now it's a different story. On a sumptuous tangle of traveller's joy, hops and brambles, I spot a peacock and a meadow brown. Then, too busy to stop, a comma passes with its distinctive zigzagging flight. In the last minutes of the count, a male purple hair streak settles on a leaf, the iridescent patches of violet on its chocolatey upper wings catching the sun. This is described as a common butterfly, but I doubt many people see them. On the wing from June to September, they spend most of their time in the canopy of mature oak woodlands, like this one. In the past, I've caught teasing glimpses through my binoculars of what I thought were probably hair streaks, but perhaps that was wishful thinking. And now, here is one, sitting right in front of me. Seconds later, he's off, back up to the treetops. So Sue, whoever she is, might not be here today, but the butterflies have put on a fair showing. Thank you very much. So, enough of me. I'd like to now introduce some of the workshop participants who have each written 4 pieces of thumbnail nature, one for each of the seasons. And the first reader is Gurnham Bubber. So Gurnham, if you would please unmute yourself. Gurnham is a storyteller for Trees for Cities and a member of Out on the Page, and he increasingly likes to dabble his toes in poetry. Take it away, Gurnham.
Thanks, Amanda. Just check you can hear me okay. Great. Okay, so we'll be starting with autumn and then going through. Wistful mist clings to still autumnal waters. Trees in festive golds, vibrant crimsons. Gourds swell, fungi umbrellas appear. Stags strut, bellowing defiance. Jay squirrel away nuts, nurseries of future forests. Geese honk farewell. Pale sun gilds all, celebrates mellow ochres tender with rouge, a honeyed leaf-kicking swan song. Glazed earth, porcelain and hushed snow. Sculpted seed heads and feathered grasses brindle the land. Fawn, buff, treacle, tar mingle with splashes of evergreen. Long shadows lean, fallow curves wait. Birds clan together, feeding hurriedly in the brief glow, dreading the sharp night. Life retreats. Ravenous winter prowls, hunter extraordinaire. The woodpeckers flash red knowingly. First drum roll for spring. The renewed kid on the block exploding onto the scene again. What a kid. A wildly frenetic, cocky lime green. Not just sap rising, but a cork-popping, zingy, punkish clarion call to beat out the rhythm of our genes. Lady Summer's cornucopia tumbles exuberant greenery onto the world. Juicy flowers shriek bright colours, jostling ripe lusciousness, coquettish perfumes bursting out of the seams. Punch-drunk bees drone, crickets crick, butterflies flit. Young sprout up, grow strong, sheltered by blazing skies. Songbirds sing, sing, sing out their hearts.
Thank you, Gurnham. I love cork-popping, zingy, funkish clarion call. Next up is Angie Holden. Angie has been writing most of her life. Most recently, at a desk so covered in leaves and feathers collected by her grandchildren that it resembles a nature table. Sounds lovely to me. Anyway, over to you, Angie.
Thank you. Spring. Park. Nut apple oak tree. Peck peck. Click click. Peck peck. Filling its beak with overwintered grubs and caterpillars. Along the hedgerow, golden catkins slow drip from the hazels as the slanting light slips between the still leafless branches, skimming a pond bloated with frog spawn. Summer. Buzzards. Sunlight breaks through low cloud, pooling in nooks between weathered fell edges. Buzzards catch the updrafts, mewing as they circle, gaining height. Like a thought held for the briefest moment, gorse blazes against purpling heather before the drizzle closes in again. Autumn. Boletes. Overnight they gather at the foot of the birch, carrying with them the scents of ancient forests and wood smoke. Leather-backed, suede-bellied, they resemble a herd of Tolkien creatures as they snuffle porcine snouts into the damp grass. Winter. Magpie. A magpie perches on the naked apple tree, searching for grubs hidden in the tightly folded buds. Its head is no more than a black smudge, its tail a scribble, its belly already dissolving against the grey sky. With a raucous caw, it lifts off into the winter's afternoon.
Thanks, Angie. I love your leather-backed and suede-bellied, so wonderfully tactile. And the next reader is Helen Webber. Helen describes herself as busy in retirement, budding artist, writer, gardener, and lover of all things green, recycling nerd, and greyhound mum. Over to you, Helen.
Thank you, Amanda. From a garden near Southampton, December. Snap, crackle, pop. Twiggy branches smashed by size 7 boots, which continue scrunching on frost-stricken leaves. Wrapping paper over dank, bleak earth, still weighted by late wet and shivering now under a raw north wind, oblivious to the low, milky sun. Sorbus area lutescens, aka whitebeam, mountain ash rowan tree. March. White frothy flowers with hammered silver leaves, their downy underbelly so soft. Peachy, like my greyhound's abdomen that begs a stroke each time I pass. And, like it, whitebeam's leaves call for a quick caress, simply irresistible. June. While seagulls scream overhead, a sunlit swell sparkles underneath, fills its lungs in the breeze and effervesces, then softens with energy spent. No water here, just a summer lawn left untamed, grown all tall and rolling like a frothy foam-capped sea. How the bees and butterflies love it. October. More spludge than crunch. Homogeneous brown leaves, rain-sodden beneath a dismal, sullen sky. Suddenly, something quite exquisite, ruby red, beckons from the ground. Some valuable heirloom gone astray? Nah, Aspreys would eschew it, a leaf. To me, though, it was priceless, and in its luminosity gave such cheer.
Thank you, Helen. A lawn as a frothy foam-capped sea. That's just wonderful, isn't it? So our next reader is Lily K. Bright. So we're back to London. Lily is a huge tree nerd and an experienced facilitator, currently writing a book of poems and short stories about birds and trees. They're also working on a non-fiction series about trees and dinosaurs for all ages. So over to you, Lily.
Thank you, Amanda. I've started with winter. Crows. Waking from slumber, flames flutter overhead. Slow burn rises. Flickers of ash sink to earth, forming charcoal birds, pecking in mud, bathing in puddles. I hear them cry, "Can you believe we have to fly again?" If birds could roll their eyes, these would. Parakeets. Sloshing through, pouring down ship masts, slipping behind, sailing between. Feathers splayed as they flee, coming in to land. Fleet of green echoes, doing their own stunts from slingshot cannons. Paint tipped over canvas, flash of vermilion glides, mosaic of green gold shrieks, disappearing in bolt holes, sirens docking. Swifts. Sonar slicing pierces ears, oil-slicked dolphins scythe, circuitous. Silver streaks sky. Precise lines, an architect's drawing, all sleek, crisp and clear and clean, no bleed, no smudge. Dozen distanced get further away, swift spirals studding skies, unsynchronized, together, still, never still. Starlings. Canary yellows, forget-me-not blues, bleed into cracks. Rat putrefies in grass, feast for flies, newborn. Sidonia oblonga canopies, bark stretched, scratches. Absinthe flames creep between bricks, wind caresses coldly. Patchwork carpet rustles or squelches, ripples layered with treasures. Starlings squabble, round little things tucking in.
I love your sonar slicing swifts. I shan't forget that expression. That was fabulous, Lily. And moving on, our next reader is Bonnie Beaucheck. Bonnie has a deep love for poetry and writing. She houses a humanitarian, spiritual, and entrepreneurial spirit, which encouraged her to become a poet, fibromyalgia creative life coach, logically creative visionary educator, and reverend. Over to you, Bonnie.
Thank you, Amanda. Bespeak. Obsidian breaths the horizon, whilst congealed stormy gray clouds hang still in Arctic air. Life withdraws beneath crunchy crocheted afghans of lace. Barren lands shriek of desolation, yet hope whimpers. Pale flecks of glamour cascade from the solstice moon, pearlescent and luminous, guiding the return of the Sun King. Magnificent oaks abandon the smoky haze of shadows, while the last vestiges of crisp ghost drapes fade. Nourishing dew dampens rich chestnut soil. Tiny stems break free, clamoring for attention. Tender shoots unfurl, trembling towards golden drops scattered, fractured through floating bits of cotton. Life emerges, victorious from restless slumber. Blush and cornflower waltz across the horizon as lemon meringue kisses mountaintops. Desire awakens scorching passions, reflecting from tumultuous waters, while southern breezes caress bare shoulders with lovers' eagerness. Jasmine and honeysuckle assault and intoxicate lonely fools. Forest teem with chocolate-shelled beetles as sultry waves consume all life. Burnt orange, mustard, and pirate gold hues swirl in whispered conversations with cooling western winds. Leaves quiver with suppressed anger for life extinguished too soon. Lengthy limbs contort into modern yoga poses under the smoldering crimson harvest moon. Earth burrows beneath the trimmings of its children, hidden from prying eyes. Thank you.
It wasn't just me that liked the lemon meringue kisses. That was lovely, Bonnie. Thank you. And now it's time for a reading from Nina Lewis. Nina is a poet from Worcestershire, and her work has appeared in various magazines and anthologies. Over to you, Nina.
Thank you. I'm going to start where we are now. Short days provide low light. Midwinter welcomes the green touch of mistletoe, ivy, and holly. The gentle nodding of snowdrops poking through frosted soil. Ducks revealed their brightest plumage. Tracks and trails can be followed. Silver days shiver as wildlife struggles through, knowing it will find spring. Days lengthen and sunshine brings new growth. Blossom comes full of promise. Creamy white flowers and soft pinks burst with fresh hope. Frog spawn delights ponds and birdsong fills the sky. Insects are attracted to new flowers and bluebells carpet woodlands with their fairy magic. Stunning spring awakes. Woodlands filled with wildflower rainbows, green beetles, ladybirds, flights of bold, beautiful butterflies. Insect life at its most abundant. Baby birds and ducklings, young cygnets taking rest, ride on parents' backs. Poppies grow along road verges, fill fields. Sumptuous sunsets, bats, and sweet scent honeysuckle fill summer evening air. A feast of blackberries and crab apples, horse chestnuts in green spiky armour, shiny treasure found above ground. elderberries, rose hips, and hawthorn berries, autumn larder for mice and hedgehogs, spectacular sunsets and bright stars, morning mist curtains the fields as nature prepares for hibernation. Thank you.
Frogspawn delights ponds. Ooh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Nina. So I'm now going to hand over to the final group of readings, which are going to be led by Vanessa Wright. Vanessa is a nature writer who lives in Hertfordshire and loves the Hebrides. She left corporate life last year to pursue her passion for wildlife and study for a master's in nature and travel writing at Bath Spa University, which is where I met her. So she has contributed to Birdwatching magazine and The Pilgrim, written on behalf of the Hertfordshire and Middlesex Wildlife Trust, and was recently longlisted for the Yeovil Literary Fiction Prize. So over to you, Vanessa.
Thank you, Amanda. And it was really lovely hearing your readings, Amanda, because I grew up in Croydon and I literally lived on Spa Hill, within earshot of the Eagles ground. And when I came back from uni, back to the South London suburbs, spent a lot of my time living in Sydenham. So I have very happy memories of all the places that you speak around with the Great Northern Wood. And I'm delighted to introduce the readers that we have for you this evening. And we're going to start with Nicola, who is actually also from my patch in Croydon, born and brought up in the same manner as I have been, and lives near the school I attended as well. So it's really nice to kind of feel that the world isn't so big after all. Nicola has always loved wildlife and enjoys walking and looking for wildlife in her patch. And one of the things I loved hearing about when I spoke with Nicola in the last week is she set herself a lockdown challenge to visit 100 spaces in 100 days within the borough. And so it was lovely. My kind of local childhood patch was going up to Grangewood and Spa Hill, and I was pleased to hear that Nicola covered that in her 100 spaces in 100 days challenge. So Nicola, it's a delight to listen from you some of these pieces that have been inspired by that challenge. So over to you, Nicola. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to start with spring. So Heathland Spring. A willow warbler's wistful song cascades from the silver birch. Iridescent whirligig beetles dance on the smooth, silent pond. A vivid jewel green tiger beetle darts across the path. Smart grey, red and black red stars streak between the trees. Rejected crossbill cones drop onto the heathland floor. Summer picnic. Like a magnet, the buddleia attracts rich velvety peacocks and red admirals. Fritillaries glow orange in the hollow. A ragged-edged comma rests, becoming a leaf. Light bright brimstone set everything on fire. Cool blues try to weave through the maelstrom as small whites calmly sail by. Autumn's last fling. Underfoot, a path of burnt sienna and ochre gives way to a dazzling carpet of geometric colour. Bright sulphur yellow and rich deep crimsons illuminate the woodland floor. In the glade, gaudy magenta pink and startling blood red clash in an outburst of flamboyance. Redwing winter. They're the spirits of the winter wood, an ethereal presence hidden deep in the ivy-wrapped trees, invisible until they sense approach, then silently they take shape and disperse, one by one, in all directions, to become intangible once again.
Thank you, Nicola. I thought that was lovely. what I felt when I was listening to that was just there was such a rainbow in every season. I think you've managed to pick out some really metallic and iridescent colours. I think that's beautiful. So thank you very much, Nicola. If you wouldn't mind going back on mute, that's beautiful. And then Paul, we're going to come to Paul now, who spends most of his time around the Oxford area, and his local patch is the Bagley Wood. And Paul is also a Bath Sparrer, which is how I met Paul. And our worlds have sort of been in similar circles. I spent a lot of my corporate life in education companies and publishing, and Paul, and obviously, and the edXL exam board. And Paul spent his life teaching classics in a school. So I'm sure that our previous worlds would have collided in some way in the past. But like me, he's decided to give up all of that world and spend more time doing the things that he loves. And that is playing with words and writing about flora and fauna, and immersing himself there. So Paul, would you mind coming off mute, please? And looking forward to hearing your seasonal selection.
I'm going to start with winter. Like the double bass, you are the big beast of the seasons. Your heavy skies carry snow and threat. Darkly, you suck back flora and fungi. But your months are not all sombre. Lengthening days reassure with early hazel catkins, and woodpeckers hammer trunks to proclaim the vernal awakening. Spring. Violinic in your viridescence, you are vibrancy. Dancing notes of glassy colour lift the veil on a bonanza of celandines and bluebells. Your starting gun is fired, the locals wake up, African winterers reappear. Is there anything more you than the bubble and squeak of reed and sedge warblers? Summer. In the limelight too briefly, your riches are tortoise shells and fritillaries, screaming swifts and blackcaps with their rich timbre. Your blooms, broods and harvest boon pluck on our heartstrings like pizzicato on a viola. And then the silence, your caesura, when songsters lie low and foreboding preludes the equinox. Autumn. The veil is replaced when swallows depart, blackberries become desiccated, leaves fall. Only fungi boast you as their phase. Yes, like wax caps, there is something silky and sensuous about you with your muffled calm and lyrical transcendence. You are the cello of the seasons, instrument of rounded, wafting sustenance.
Paul, that was so beautiful. And what I particularly love about that is it just reminds me of Vivaldi's Four Seasons, the musicality of it, and, you know, just the way you cleverly brought in the whole string quartet. I just thought it was really beautiful. And yeah, I could listen to that. It's just so musical. So thank you for that. I'm now going to introduce Britta Benson. And Britta has been in Scotland since the year 2000, and she's from Germany originally, but she's also a circus performer, and she loves writing about the wildlife habitat. And I hope your power is okay up in Scotland, Britta, because I'm on my way to the Hebrides in the morning, and I'm slightly nervous that I'm not going to be able to sail with all the gales. So I hope that your power will last out through here, and it's wonderful to have you on, Britta, so thank you.
Thanks, Vanessa. I'm going to start with spring, because I simply cannot wait. Spring. Narcissus bends down his curious yellow head, gasping unashamedly into our garden pond, his mouth wide open, drooling into this witch's cauldron of earthly delights. Spring's bubbling potion, this frothy orgy of frog upon frog, of sun and potluck, the ingredients of life. Summer. One drop of sun sneaks through my eyelids with a mission. Dancing purples swell red, orange flickers tickle the sleepy freckles on my iris. I lose all sense of otherness as my body leans into the distant soul of a galaxy and connects unconditionally with this dying star of life. Autumn. My hand weaves past the leaves, past fruit still spring clean green, past blushing heads leaning cheek to cheek. Then the prize. I hold the whole of summer between the soft tips of my expert fingers. I pluck plump, silly days and sultry nights. Just the blackberries, a world, enough. Winter, midwinter walk. My foot crunches the stories of a morning. Neatly layered hours, snow on snow, now compressed into a size 8 pancake of ice. Who came first? The robin, the deer? Waterproof boots edit events, have the last word, until snow on snow, my footprints disappear under the duvet. Thank you.
Thank you, Britta. I thought that was beautiful. And actually, I think I could have you read the telephone directory and it sound beautiful with your lovely accent. And what I loved about your pieces is I think it's so physical and so visceral. You know, the sun is sneaking through the eyelids and you get all the colours, and your size 8 pancake of ice. I think that's just so, oh, I love the senses of that. I think it's really lovely. So thank you very much. So it's my turn to read a piece that I've written, and Amanda chose to read some pieces around the Great North Wood. It's been a long time since I've been anywhere near the Great North Wood, and actually that was a promise I did make to Amanda, is that we would go for a walk back on the home patch. But I'm going closer to my new home in Hertfordshire. Well, not so new, I've been here 20 years. And I'm going to read a piece about the woods that is my local woods. And this story is called Back to My Roots. Life began in the beak of a jay. A rush of wind swirled around me as he carried me closer to the sun. I was cradled in the mouth of the bird whose Sunday name means chattering acorn gatherer. How apt. I just called him Jay though. As quickly as we ascended higher into the blue, we were on our way down again, unceremoniously buried about a mile from where I fell. He came back for my brothers and sisters as the air turned cold and autumn turned to winter. But I lay snuggled in the soil under a blanket of leaf litter. I took root and thrust my way through crisp, crunchy compost as the days got longer. I was elated to bask in the sunshine again. But my corvid companion hadn't forgotten me. He even brought his children to visit this time. I willingly donated a couple of my tender and succulent leaf buds to give them the best start in life. It was a place of serenity for us all to grow up in. After my leaves fell 5 times, I was taller than the humans I so rarely saw. But it wasn't until Queen Victoria's coronation, which coincided with my own Golden Jubilee, that I celebrated by throwing my first confetti of acorns. everyone in the wood came to rejoice. Russet red squirrels bowed their heads and twitched their tufted ears in my honour, and they shared my spoils along with the descendants of Jay. He had long passed on, but his great-grandchildren still visited me. They looked exactly the same as him, with their puce pink plumage and electric blue wing flashes. I conducted a symphony of songs from my boughs. The woodpecker's percussive drum, crows crunked a rhythmic bass line, the tinkling triangle of the goldcrest. They accompanied the glorious melodies of the redbreasts, finches and thrushes, and the wood pigeons clapped their applause. I had come of age. The crescendo of this chorus came each spring. It was satisfying to provide an abundance of homes and feasts as I got older. After years of tranquility, it came as a shock when part of our neighbourhood was chopped down so that people could move in. Week after week, they came with their axes. Trees crashed and fell, their inhabitants now homeless. A gentleman called Lord Grimthorpe built his house where my companions once stood, or should I say mansion. All that space for one man and his wife. He named it after our neck of the woods though, Batchwood Hall. Tunnels, like the Badgers dug, were excavated all the way to the cathedral, just so he could spy on his workmen who were erecting the west wing. I could see the progress from my spot on the hill, as I had become quite tall by then. Life for my daughters became difficult, however. The arrival of deer who barked in Asian tongues and had ferocious appetites. And around the same time, squirrels with American accents appeared. They were far less respectful than the reds. These greedy new visitors stripped the bark off my relatives, and many perished. What was it about these wealthy Victorians where they felt the need to bring these animals from foreign lands? It was the beginning of several sorrowful seasons for us all. Comrades went to war as naval ships. I often thought of my fallen friends as they navigated stormy seas with cannons blasting from their bows. Men planted a new orderly regiment alongside us, conifers that grew taller much faster than us oaks. But it did spare me the same terrifying fate at least. I no longer saw the reds. Those nut hoarders, along with the kites, were long gone by now. I missed them. As I got older, I provided sweet sap to His Imperial Majesty. The vivid violets shone like stars in my canopy. Fluttering above me, the scuffles and skirmishes between the emperors were a summer constant. I was in my prime. But the hard times came again, this time even worse than before. Mechanical creatures with serrated teeth tore through the woodland and reduced our neighbourhood by a third, felling many of my friends. All to create a playground for wealthy men. Grass shorn for lawns, with holes. They arrived with sticks and balls. Now and then, I caught a ball, much to their annoyance. After 5 more seasons of my acorns falling, the sky went dark. People turned off all of their lights. In the distance, the horizon glowed. Dust and smoke filled the air. Metallic birds roared overhead. The lake beside the cathedral shimmered in the moonlight and was used as a navigational landmark to return to London, but not before expelling their exploding droppings over us. The noise, the flames. Fellows fell like soldiers who had been shot. I remained steadfast and strong. Thankfully, peace returned once more. But lo and behold, I spotted women dressed in trousers, rundling in the wood. The men gasped, "Good grief!" I whispered in the wind, "Hello." They lingered, and enjoyed the bonnets of bluebells that lay around my feet every May. They loved the snowdrops in the spring, admired the fungi in the autumn, and they brought their families to enjoy a picnic under my branches in the summer. I flourished. 70 leaf falls on, I am now wearing furry slippers. My body has become sturdy and stout, and I am now as wide as I am tall. It happens to us all, you know. I have a canopy of corkscrew curls and knobbly knuckles as I grow old. My skin now wrinkled like humans' fingers and feet. Some of my arms have been struck by lightning and have withered now. As I stand here in the wane of my life, I worry for the future. My ash compatriots are dying around me. Tropical flashes dressed in carnival green arrived for the first time this year. They dance in my leaves. Their shrill squawking drowns out the bird symphony and scares the titmice. And I hear news of processional moths marching from London, ending the lives of many friends. But I am caressed and comforted by the arms of ivy. And there are glimmers of hope. I saw descendants of an old friend for the first time in 100 acorn festivals. Oh my, what a delight to see this gleaming red bird with its forked tail back here again. And people who now wear masks have spent more time with us during this last year. I hear them talking about how they never knew we were here before and how they have come to love us. A girl now sits on my birch neighbour that fell in Stormelon and tells me how wonderful I am. She visits every week now. She puts her arms around me to work out how old I am and tells me I must have seen so much, being at least 200 years old. If only she knew. So I wrote that piece about Batchwood, my local patch, and that's my favourite oak in the whole of the wood. And I just wanted to write that story to honour the history of the place and to celebrate the oak, my favourite tree. So I hope you enjoyed that, and back over to Amanda. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. What a brilliant perspective that was. And I feel like I've had a history lesson too, which is brilliant because my history is a bit shaky. I can't overstate what a joy it's been hearing all of those readings in this first part of this evening. So I wanted to say a really big thank you, obviously to Vanessa, but also to all our other readers, Gurnham, Angie, Helen, Lily, Bonnie, Nina, Nicola, Paul and Britta. It's been wonderful hearing all of your voices. It's brought words on the page to life, and I can see from the chat that people have really enjoyed it. So you all read brilliantly. Thank you so much. Now, what we're going to do now is have a break. We're going to start again at 7:05. The thing that Vanessa and I have in common is that we both jacked in our corporate lives to become nature writers and do other things. So what we're going to do in the second part of this evening is you're going to hear us chatting about what it's like being a writer and how we do our nature writing. And so hopefully you won't go away. We're going to have a quick break and then we'll see you again at 7:05. See you in a bit.
Do you want another one?
Hello, welcome back, everybody. I think we've got a good contingent back in the room. So I'm going to ask Vanessa to unmute as well. So it was a lovely first half with some incredibly professional, wonderful reading. This bit's going to be slightly more anarchic. Don't know quite how this will go, but I'm trusting that Vanessa's on top of things, basically. So she's going to make sure it's going to be a slick operation, aren't you, Vanessa?
I'll try my best.
So this is experimentally one of the things that I have always enjoyed about the course that Vanessa and I are on is the opportunity to hear other writers talking about how they write and their challenges, etc., etc. So what our plan is to have a very informal chat conversation between ourselves about how we write. And it'll be interesting for me because although I know Vanessa, there's lots of questions I want to ask her. And we'll also hopefully have the chance to ask you if you had any questions you wanted to ask us. So if we can manage the technology efficiently enough, we'll try that as well. So, but we're going to start off. I'm going to hand over to Vanessa, who's going to start with the first question.
Thanks, Amanda. And yes, multitasking isn't one of my fortes, but I'm going to do my best to try and keep an eye on the chat as well. So, Amanda, first of all, I'd love to hear, first of all, do you write every day? And if you do you have like a word count or a target that you set yourself?
I would really like to be the sort of writer who writes every day and who can say, oh yes, I always get 500 words done before lunchtime. I'm absolutely not like that at all. I tend to pack any writing I'm doing into the beginning of every week, and by the time it's got to Thursday and Friday, I'm just itching to get out of the house. So I tend to jack it all in and go and spend time bird watching or botanizing or just generally doing naturey things. And I do also like to spend some time out in nature where I'm absolutely not thinking about writing, but I can just let go of that and totally just enjoy the experience without having to think, oh, I must make a note of that. And it's nice to get the two. So I'd like to do a bit of both. But what about you, Vanessa? What do you manage every day?
No, I'm relieved to hear that you don't write every day, because I always feel guilty when I'm not writing every day. Although I did make it my New Year's resolution to start morning pages, which is you just write 3 pages of whatever is in your head and you do a little brain dump. And actually what I quite like about morning pages is there's no pressure to write anything good. I can be the most utter rubbish that comes out, and it almost kind of is quite cathartic, I think. So I'm like you, and also I sort of really worry that the words aren't coming. And I saw a quote on social media the other day that says walking is writing, which made me feel 100 times better that I could just go out and enjoy a walk, enjoy nature, and that actually is writing, because those little seeds are planting themselves to come out sometime in the future. So I just kind of think, oh yeah, I just enjoy nature, and as you say, those little nuggets will come out. And actually what I've noticed is, even in the last month, there's little nuggets I've written in my morning pages that's like, oh, that could be a seed of an idea. I don't know where it's going to go or how it's going to develop, but actually I sort of have to now trust in the process, that it will come if it's not coming right now.
Yeah. And in terms of what you write, do you ever write poetry instead of prose?
So if you'd have asked me this time last year, I would have said there's absolutely no way I'm writing any poetry ever. I don't do poetry. And I didn't really think that poetry was for people like me. That sounds a bit of a crazy thing to say, but I didn't really study English, and I didn't really feel I was kind of literary. So it was actually a happy accident that I ended up writing some poems. I attended a workshop last year, and I hadn't read the small print and didn't realise it was with a poet in residence, and that would have to spend the next 4 hours writing poems, much to my horror. And I sort of assessed the room, the digital room, and thought, well, there's no backing out because there's only 8 of us here, and it's a real privilege that I'm actually here. So I better just get stuck in and try. So I have recently started. Actually, what I really like about it is it's actually really fun. And I like that I can just distill a moment or distill a thing, just in something really small and concise and compact. I'm not going to be the next poet laureate anytime soon, that's for sure, but it's not really the point. I kind of like doing it. I do a lot about little birds, and I try to sort of think of little characteristics about the birds that I like, and try and sort of just do fun stuff. I'm not sure I'm ready to share any of my poems with you right now, though.
Well, you see, I would have said, for me, I never write poetry, although I have been, so Lily, who's on the call, I absolutely love your poetry, Lily, and I think I'm going to have, inspired by you, yes, kisses to you too, inspired by you, I'm going to have a go.
Yeah, but actually, Lily,
like Vanessa, I'm going to hide it away.
In Walthamstow wetlands, and again, you were reading some of your poems there, and I was like, oh, I'm really learning about the way you use kind of the words and the rhythm, and yeah, it's just really lovely to be part of your workshop. So Amanda, what do you do if you get writer's block?
Well, in many ways it was writer's block that made me kind of think of the idea of thumbnail nature, because I used to find that I would sit, particularly when I first started writing, I would sit, which we're talking about nature writing about 2.5 years ago, I would sit looking at a blank screen or a blank sheet of paper and be absolutely paralysed about where to start. And I got to the point where I was, thinking I've got to be kind to myself, it's not have ridiculous expectations, and perhaps think, well, if I could write 50 words, just start with 50, write those 50 words, polish those 50 words, and if that's all I write that day, that's fine. And I just found that whole sort of giving yourself permission, you know, even if I'd written one word but it was the right word, it's giving yourself permission not to have to produce huge volumes of writing. And like many of those things, once you've started, actually the other words start coming. But that was the thing that made me think about thumbnail nature. And the other side of it was that, you know, in 50 words, as we heard from those beautiful readings earlier, you can capture a single moment, a single nature moment, and really explore it and treasure it in that 50 words. So for me, that's the thing that I do if I get writer's block. I go back to the basics and say, just start with 50 words, see how you get on. What about you? What do you do?
I must say, I think you make a really good point about putting yourself under a lot of pressure to write. And I think that you get into a self-fulfilling kind of cycle that you put yourself under pressure and then you can't write and then it's worse. And I've certainly had long periods actually where I've just felt paralyzed. And I think, you know, you have kind of this kind of perfectionism that you must get the perfect word on the page and it must come out in the perfect way. Otherwise, you're not a good enough writer. So I've certainly grappled with that a lot over the last year or so, particularly with the course and being surrounded by so many brilliant people. You know, you think, oh, am I worthy of being part of this crowd, and are my words good enough? But I think some of the things I've done to help myself is just get outside. And if the words aren't coming now, they might come in time, and walk. I often find that you just have a little seed of an idea when you're walking around the wood or, you know, the local patch. And sometimes things just come in really unexpected ways. And yeah, even things like going to like nature talks and things like that, it's like, oh, that might trigger an idea. So I'm trying not to kind of put myself under perfectionism pressure, that therefore leads to perfectionist paralysis. So I'm just trying to sort of be kind to myself, as you say, and that celebrate, even if it's just doing something small, like 100 words or something like that. And just that I don't feel like you have to do it every day.
And do you find, is there a place that you go, a good writing spot that helps you, that makes the writing easier?
Well, one of the places I do go, as you heard in the piece I read, is right at the end. The girl visits the tree and sits on the birch fallen neighbour. That's me. And I go to that tree just to sit, to take the nature in, observe it. And I just write a little field journal about my local patch. It's just notes, but it's just it's just observing, it's just feeling, it's just being outside. So I'd say that was a special spot in terms of where I go to just make sure I'm writing something. Mm-hmm. And I think it can sometimes be a little bit too dangerous to say, right, I have to write in that place because therefore you can't write anywhere. So I think, again, it's really, you don't want to set yourself up to fail. Like, you could write anywhere really. And sometimes I write from the bed.
I've always had this fantasy about being the sort of writer that sits in a cafe and gets all their writing done. And I see people doing this around Crystal Palace, where I live, in the cafes. But it'd be absolutely hopeless for me because I'm so easily distracted. So anybody walking past, or somebody with a nice dog or whatever. But also I would eat far too much cake. So that would be hopeless as well. Too much coffee and cake. But yeah, it's a nice idea. But in practice, I have to be in my back bedroom where I am now. And that makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. So what would you say, Amanda, really inspires you? Where do you get your best ideas?
Well, in terms of where, so I guess the things that I write about most are the familiar and commonplace. And those of you who did or came to Anita Roy's workshop, that she co-led a workshop with me, that was our big thing, and that's something that Anita and I talk about a lot. it's the idea that you can enjoy and write about nature. It doesn't have to be, you know, this incredibly special bird that turns up in the Outer Hebrides once every 5 years. I'm having a little dig at Vanessa there. Or it doesn't have to be some amazing rare orchid or whatever. That actually being able to look with fresh eyes at something that you see every day and kind of distill its essence and share that with other people, that's the thing that I get excited about in writing. So I'm always kind of looking for that commonplace. And also a lot of the writing I do, particularly the column that I'm writing in Birdwatching magazine, it's looking at it's kind of, there's a bit of poking fun at bird watchers, you know, to not take yourselves too seriously and recognize that, you know, not all of us can drop everything when there's a rare bird appearing, but you know, we kind of fit bird watching around the rest of our lives. So it's those kind of things. It's mixing real life with nature watching and being realistic about that, but also enjoying the commonplace. But
Yeah.
And in terms of when I get my best ideas, usually 4 o'clock in the morning when I can't sleep. So that's which is not very convenient, but some of them are worthwhile in the morning. What about you, Vanessa?
Well, like you, actually, I write a lot about, you know, I've had long COVID for the last year or so, and I've spent a lot of time in the bed. Fortunately, my bed looks out onto my garden. So, you know, I've spent, you know, I do little noodles about the blackbirds that visit or the blue tits that visit. You know, just little bits and bobs that you can just do. But as obviously I've got better and I've got more and more energy, it's a slow process. But, you know, I get back out into the local wood and, you know, spend time in the local wood, just sitting there. And again, it's just the joy in what's in your local patch, and even in exactly the same spot that I sit, just how it changes over time and the seasons, and you just notice different things. So I get a lot of joy and pleasure from just writing about my local patch. But equally, you know, I try and spend as much time as I can up in the Hebrides, just because I love it and the air's clear and that helps my breathing a lot. So I love going up there, and so, you know, I'm hoping that in the next week or so I'll be finding some more inspiration to write another article about what's up there, the wildlife. And it's just so contrasting to, you know, being in London and growing up in London to then get to spend time up there. So it's just.
Do you find that the nature writing, does that affect your physical and mental health? I mean,
I would say nature writing has definitely benefited my mental health in terms of forcing me to get outside or forcing me to enjoy nature. I mean, I think it's quite well known, isn't it, that there's a study that you know, if you're recovering and you have access to looking at green spaces, that improves your healing and your recovery. So I definitely think, you know, noticing nature, and it definitely improves your mental health. And I suppose you could say it's given me impetus to get outside and to build strength. It would have been so easy to just stay in bed and to just keep succumbing to the feeling of not being able to breathe. But, you know, it's about doing a little bit more each day and building your energy, building your kind of strength up. And yeah, that's what I've been finding really is, you know, it forces me to get out. And I know that whenever, even if it's just the nature reserve that's 15 minutes from the house, it's only a tiny little place off a busy London road, but even just the point of going there, just sitting, noticing, writing the journal, it's just tremendously healing, I think. And so, you know, it helps immensely. What about you, Amanda? Do you find, you know, obviously you've done a great job with being the London Wildlife Trust Nature Writer in Residence, and obviously I know Kathleen Jamie wrote something once about nature writing being the preserve of white middle-aged middle-class men, and obviously there's been a lot of great work through lots of different voices that we're trying to encourage into nature writing. But do you think And I know that's one of your goals of doing what you have been doing, but do you think there is still a long way to go? Or, you know, what's your views on the diversity inclusion in nature writing as it stands today?
I think there's lots more to do. And I think it's one of those things that we can't ever take our eye off the ball. It's going to need lots more nurturing. I mean, even just on the call tonight, there's more diversity in terms of interest. The green shoots are there, but I think it's, you know, we're all duty bound to do whatever we can to encourage underrepresented voices. And it's one of those things, I don't think we can ever stop doing that. We need to keep doing it. So
do you have any recommendations of people whose nature writing is from those voices that you could recommend to the group?
Well, I would recommend, so all of the people who have co-hosted my workshops are all people who do amazing nature writing and would be worth listening to all of their works. And if you missed any of those workshops, I have a YouTube channel and they're all recorded and on there. So please do go and see those. But it's just, I mean, it's relatively straightforward for all of us to be out there listening to and trying to find new voices. So I think it's, you know, we don't need to keep going back to the same writers who just happen to be the ones who are currently getting, you know, long listed for nature writing prizes. There are more people out there and we just need to go out and look for them. So, you know, if there's one kind of message that I would say to everybody tonight, just listen to as many different people that you can. And that's the best thing to do, I think, and encourage them. But in terms of, I mean, I mentioned workshops there. So this is not supposed to be just so I'm fishing for compliments, but Vanessa, what would you say about, you know, writing workshops? You've mentioned several different people's writing workshops tonight, so it's obviously something that's important to you. And why do you do them?
So I do them, well, I do them a lot when I've got writer's block, actually. And when I need just a different idea, a different inspiration or a different perspective. And it might not be that the whole workshop kind of brings something, but it might, again, it's just a different nugget, a different thought, something that might be planted that I could kind of develop later on. And what I like about it as well is there is an element of writing without pressure, and you just do the exercises, and some of the exercises work out great. Some of the exercises don't. Obviously, doing a master's, there's a lot of pressure to do the assignment and to get the assignment in and do well in the assignment. So it's quite nice to do something where you're writing without pressure. And I've personally love tended, you know, your ones, Amanda. But also there's been some great work, you know, there's been some great ones both in person and online. Certainly Spread the Word had a great series last summer where I saw Lily amongst others. I know Jessica Lee did some with Spread the Word that were really good, and there's been a series around eco-poetry, and again, not all of them I can do, or the ideas might not come on that evening, but it's just a bit of fun and to see how others work and, you know, how they might tackle a topic, and you know, the participants, you'll see some great things like you have tonight, just from hearing other people and hearing and, you know, a different perspective on the same thing that you're writing about. I just find that really fascinating. And you've just come across really inspiring people. And as you say, it's a great way to just find new and different voices who you might not have otherwise come across before. And, you know, it sort of builds that network and community, I think.
Definitely.
And yeah, I just really enjoy that.
I was really lucky to be able to attend excuse me, a nature writing workshop with Amy Jane Beer and Nicola Chester, which was in person. Vanessa was there as well. And the only issue for me is that I am such fans of those two writers that I was a bit overawed by, and we had to read out stuff that we'd written, and I almost was paralysed and unable to read it in front of them because I just think they're just so wonderful. But they were lovely, and that's the other thing, is that it means that you get to know people in a more personal way. And my experience of other nature writers is that they're incredibly generous and you know, supportive, and you get all of that from doing workshops as well. And even just, you know, reading the comments from the readings earlier on. I mean, you guys are just, you're also nice to each other and so supportive, and it's wonderful. And it's, you know, kind of when you spend quite a lot of your time, as I do, sort of sitting in a room writing on my own, it's really nice to have that, you know, that sense that you're part of a bigger community. And I love that. And I love that about nature writers. I think they're just a wonderful group of people.
Yeah, that's great. So Amanda, do you enter any writing competitions, and if so, why do you do them, and what's been your experience of them, and would you recommend them?
I haven't done recently. I'm a bit rubbish at keeping an eye on deadlines. So quite often I think, that sounds like a really good competition. And I sort of think, oh shit, it was last week, and you know, so I've missed it. So I'm a bit rubbish at that. But the ones that I have done, I don't know if you people on the call will have come across the Museum of Walking, which is a really fascinating organisation based in South East London. And their whole thing is about putting on events to do with walking, but they run a whole load of competitions. And for anybody who's never had a go at a competition before, they're usually sort of, you know, so it's flash writing, so it's normally 250 words. They'll have a topic. The one at the moment is walking home, although I think it's probably ends in a couple of days. But it's a really nice, friendly way to have a first go at a competition. So you know, you don't have to aim for the biggest, scariest thing to start off with. It's really nice to start small, maybe, and you know, so a friendly competition like that would be a good place to start. But what about you? Do you do competitions?
Yeah, I have, and to be honest with you, I've not really been that successful. And again, when you're kind of on a low, kind of, you know, a low mode of when you think, oh my God, can I do this course? Can I write? You know, sometimes it doesn't help. But actually, I've just been a little bit, you know, I sort of just try to do lots of them just to give it a go and to have a try. But you know, I did get longlisted at one, and I was really surprised at that and wasn't expecting it. So that was really nice. And with a piece that I just thought was really left field. And then, you know, it's also a great learning opportunity, because often, you know, I've just been unsuccessful in another one that I got some, you know, there was a kind of a judge's critique, if you like, that came through, I think it was this morning or yesterday. And not that it was about my poem specifically, but it's kind of like, oh, the judges were looking for this, and this is what, so it's trying to get like the odd tip from them. And the way I've sort of approached it is if I am writing for a competition entry, I just think at the moment, oh, well, that's a piece that could go in my portfolio for my master's. So, you know, it's not a waste and it's not a loss. I am, however, you know, giving up a job and not having any income, sometimes price can be prohibitive. So I try to focus on the ones that are either really low cost or free. Unless they're ones that, you know, sometimes the tutors say, you really should try to enter this one, which I try to do. But again, I've tried to take the pressure off myself that if I don't fancy it, then I'm not going to do it.
No. That's very
rather than putting myself forward. Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, wouldn't it be amazing to get the recognition, you know, that being successful in one of those competitions brings, because I'm sure it would just give such a confidence boost. But equally, you know, the flip side of that is, you know, there can be hundreds of entries, and, you know, whilst there's a lot of objectivity to it, and this is what they admitted in the thing I received yesterday was, you know, this was what we read on this particular day and how we felt on this particular day. So I sort of was trying not to be too disheartened, but yeah, you know, you never know. So Amanda, obviously you have to start somewhere, and putting your work out there is a massive kind of getting over the fear of doing that, is a big hurdle. But can you tell us how you felt when you first started doing that, and, you know, how have you overcome those feelings? What have you done to just sort of get over that?
Well, that's easy really, because I haven't managed to overcome those feelings, and so even though I'm, now a fairly experienced feature writer, I still find for every feature, every article that I write, a commissioned article. So, for example, I've just written an article about birdwatching in car parks for Birdwatching magazine. Bear with me here. So it is a thing, birdwatching in car parks. And I made the decision that I wanted to write sort of nature writing noir. So it starts off with a slightly sinister. There's something about car parks that can be slightly sinister, I always think. They're quite often used, aren't they, in thrillers, where if somebody goes down into a car park, you know that nothing good is going to happen, frankly. So I wanted to kind of play with that. But I wrote this article and sent it off to the editor, and there was a bit of me that I just thought, I have this awful fear every time I send off these articles that I have finally written complete dross, and the editor is then going to have to think how to politely tell me that it's not publishable. And so I go through that process. It doesn't matter how many times I do that, send these things off. Every time I keep thinking, oh my god, is this the time that he's going to say, no, I'm sorry, I can't publish that. But so far I've been lucky, and I kind of get round that by quite often I write articles where I quote other people, and it's quite, this is a cunning tip, that if you write an article where you quote somebody else, then you can say to them, would it be all right if I ran the whole thing past you, and then you could just tell me whether the way that I've presented what you said was okay. And of course, if you wanted to give me any comments about the rest of the article, that's fine too. So that's my way of kind of getting a bit of a free, helpful editing from other people. And they're brilliant. People give you fantastic tips, do check all your typos for you. So I'd really encourage that. And it's just something, just as a more on a more serious note, sometimes if you're writing a longish piece, it's really nice to have other voices in there. And I spend a lot of time chatting to scientists and people who work in the nature field and writers, etc. And and I do it because I love talking to them, and then it's really nice to be able to get their voices into a piece as well. So but yeah, to go back to your original thing, I'm not sure that feeling is ever going to go away, and maybe that's you could argue that's a good thing. I wouldn't want to get to the point where I just think, I can write any old rubbish and send it off, and they should just publish it. So it's quite good, I think, to keep that sense of don't get complacent. But what about you?
I must say, sort of getting the first commission was exciting and terrifying at the same time. And I don't know how long I spent writing it, but I certainly spent a hell of a long time editing it. Just because I was like, I can't possibly send this. It can't quite be ready yet. It can't possibly be good enough. So I spent loads and loads of time, and again, as you say, that fear of they're going to hate it and they're going to say, oh no, sorry, you're a fraud and you're a fake, but actually when you get your first nice comments back, and then you see it in the actual printed magazine, it's a really proud moment. And it's just really lovely when you do finally get it out there. But I have to say, I'm writing a follow-up sister piece to the birdwatching article that was my first commission, and now I'm in the space of, well, okay, I've done it once. Can I do it again? And how can I be original for a second time? And as you say, it probably doesn't ever go away. And maybe it's a good thing that it doesn't go away, because it keeps you on your toes, and you keep bringing your A game. You don't get complacent and sloppy. So yeah, I do totally. I'm not reassured that it doesn't go away, Amanda.
I'm going to invite Jane Adams onto the call to join us. Hi, Jane. Nice to see you. Hello. It's great to have you here. I was just going to ask Vanessa, but I'm going to ask you first, in fact, whether you think, as a nature writer, do you think it's important to read a lot of nature writing to be a good nature writer? And if you do, who's your favourite author?
Oh no, I'm a really bad person to ask that question of. I don't read a lot of nature writing. I mean, I have read, actually the most I've read is because I've done a few BBC Wildlife Magazine book reviews. And so they've sent me the books and I've had to read them. And some of those books have been absolutely mind-blowing, and I wouldn't have read them if I'd had the choice, so to speak. So my normal reading is a lot of sort of historical murder mysteries. It's usually something to switch off because I'm a carer for my husband as well. So after working full time during the day, I just want something sort of to take me away from it. So I'm probably a really bad person to ask, but I have read some really amazing nature writing books recently that I reviewed. One was The Heading by Rob Cowan, which is actually a book of poetry that he did during the lockdown. And I would highly, highly recommend anyone to read that, even if you're not into poetry, which I'm actually not. So does that answer your question? Because I think Vanessa has read that as well. I know that you really loved that, didn't you?
Yeah.
What about you, Vanessa?
Yeah, reading poetry, as I sort of said before, I'm not from a literary background and I haven't done any of that. So, reading poems, but Rob, I tell you what it was. It was, I think Rob Heading was on Radio 4 or somewhere reading The Starling in his lovely Yorkshire accent. And I was just blown away. And it's the first time I remember saying to him, I said, Mum, I was at Mum's, I said, Mum, you've got to listen to this. I said, it's about the starlings and it's just amazing. And then when his book published, he got loads of different authors reading his poems out on Twitter. And honestly, there's some in there that reduced me to tears. And I didn't think a poem was capable of that. But there's a really lovely one about an old woman at a pharmacy, and there's another one, on the nursing ward. And I was just like, oh, goodness me. But it's a really lovely combination about the time we've all been through together, and also, some real, his descriptions of like the kestrel, like a pinned butterfly hovering above the motorway, just really vivid descriptions. I absolutely love that. But I mean, again, like you, I don't feel like I've been in a really busy corporate job for the last 2 decades, and I've had no time to read. So I'm only really new to reading. And so I haven't read as much. I feel like I haven't read as much as I should do to learn about nature writers and, what makes good nature writing and what doesn't. And I feel I still need to read more. But what's been great about doing the Masters is I've just discovered so many authors who I'd never come across before. And it's just really, it's just, I must say, sort of a love of Scotland. I've really, again, discovered Kathleen Jamie, and, I really what I like about her is she does like lots of connected personal essays. I think I've probably got a short attention span, and I quite like the fact that, that they're sort of digestible chunks. And again, she's she writes about a landscape that I love. But I think, the most important thing is to be outside, and that's the most important thing. Is you can read all you like, but unless you experience things yourselves or see things yourselves, you're never going to be able to be a good nature writer unless you're out looking, noticing.
I find that like Jane, I'm often want to read kind of thrillery detective things, but I found the perfect sort of halfway house, which is Anne Cleeves. So those of you who know, who wrote the Shetland series, and so she's amazing because she is also incredibly knowledgeable about nature, and all her detective stories have lots of the natural world in. So that's my kind of perfect halfway house.
Yeah, I love Vera. I watch a lot of Vera on the telly, and I just love that character, because I think it's really important to be able to write about people as well as wildlife as well. It's sort of having that rounded understanding. Another, I was thinking when Vanessa was talking, another one I actually do absolutely love is Helen Mcdonald. But I can't say that I absolutely love H is for Hawk, but I do love her set of articles, Vesper Flights.
Yeah, same.
Which is a really beautiful book.
Mm. And the other author I've really enjoyed reading is Ginny Reddy. So just a different perspective on nature, and also it's really nice to have to. I'm quite drawn to female writers who don't write from a perspective of I know everything about nature, so who are learning about it and picking things up, and this, it needs to be it needs to be open to all different people who are not necessarily nature experts, because otherwise most of us would never have got into nature writing in the first place. So I love her because of that. But I'm also incredibly lucky because the London Wildlife Trust volunteers, our local volunteers from our local woods, Sydenham Hill Woods, have set up a nature writing reading group, which is so I've been a couple of times, and so that's made me read things and get on with reading books that perhaps I wouldn't have, as Vanessa was saying, the books that you should be reading. But and I've enjoyed those hugely. And Vesper Flights was one of those which I possibly wouldn't have read if it hadn't been for reading it for the nature writing.
Because I think haven't you been reading the Peregrine recently?
Oh yes, yeah, and I've been reading the Peregrine, so that's. So
which is a book that sort of everybody says, oh, you must read that, and I think you either absolutely love it or hate it.
So do you
and I think that's the thing. I remember when we first went to the residential on the Masters that week, and we all sort of talked about books that we loved and that we loved to read. And I remember before I started the course, I absolutely loved Chris Packen's Fingers in the Sparkle Jar, but I was absolutely aghast that loads of people really didn't like it. And it just goes to show that you can't write to please everybody, and everybody's going to have their personal tastes, and so you've just got to write for what you want to try and achieve, and to try and speak to the people that you want to speak to. But yeah, I remember, how can you not like that book?
Or even you're just writing for yourself. I know when we had a workshop recently with, if people know her, Amy Jane Beer, and she said she writes for herself. She doesn't write for other people anymore. And if other people like what she writes, then she's really happy. But she actually writes almost to make herself happy nowadays. And I think, well, that's actually quite a nice way of doing it. Not being worried about what other people think.
So people approaching things from lots of different perspectives is kind of what we're touching on there. And I suppose another sort of question is it necessary to have access to the countryside to write about nature? And that's something that's discussed often now. Obviously, as I'm a very urban-based nature writer, so I would say straight away, absolutely not, because I can walk out into my street, or I can, as I did recently, I went on a fantastic pavement plant walk in Deptford with a very new, young, sort of potential nature writer and wordsmith there, Quasia, and she and I went pavement spotting, and that was a trigger for a whole load of writing. So you absolutely, from my perspective, you absolutely do not need to have access to the countryside. But I know Jane, who lives in a much more rural area, might have a different view. What do you think, Jane?
No, I don't actually, because I mean, during lockdown, because my husband was so vulnerable, I actually got to the point where I wasn't going out because half of our village decided to go out in the footpaths around here. So it was really, really busy. So I stayed in the garden, but I now know every single inch of my garden. And I loved discovering that. And I don't think, even if you've got a window box or, just a little square of garden, I think there's an awful lot that you can get from that. And also memory. I mean, I write from memory from years and years and years ago, things that I've seen or done, or sometimes it's quite nice to write fiction and make things up. So no, I'm actually, although I live in the depths of Dorset, I don't actually think it's necessary.
I'm going with just a little plug here. So I'm leading or co-leading a nature writing workshop with Helen Jones, who's on the call today. She's giving us a little wave. So Helen and I are leading a workshop which is about nature through a window, because we've both been experienced being confined to a bedroom for various reasons, and just being able to write about what goes past your window wherever you live, because it's almost unavoidable that you'll see no nature out of your window, even if it's just gulls flying over. There is going to be something there, and that is on the 26th of February. So hopefully some of you will be able to join us for that. Okay, so there was what we've talked about.
Torch, doesn't she? Josie writes from the bed as well, and there's lots, and there's even if you're on a balcony in London, you'll see the birds flying, or sometimes the peregrines will fly and chase the pigeons, or you can find wildlife when you don't really expect to. I know it's quite commonplace nowadays to see peregrines in city centres, but I know it didn't used to be, and it's amazing sometimes if you just look up or just look out of the window.
I do want to have a chance to see whether any of our audience members have a question. So if you do have a question, if you could stick it, I've got at least one already, but do stick it on the chat. Just while I ask these guys the last thing I was going to ask them, which was, what would be your top writing tip for an aspiring nature writer? Jane, do you want to kick off with that?
Ooh, I mean, I'm desperately trying to write a book at the moment, which has to be finished by the end of May, which is rather a tight deadline. And and it's my first book. And so I have had to learn some good writing tips myself very, very quickly. And I think probably the one that I would say to people is just try and write something every day, and don't care too much what you're writing, just write for 5-10 minutes. It might be complete and utter rubbish, but you might read it after you've written it and think, yeah, there's something there. Or you might think, that's complete rubbish, I'm not going to do this today. But just try and get into a habit of doing it, on a regular basis, because it's definitely helped me.
What about you, Vanessa?
I think mine would be get outside, even if it's your front doorstep, your back garden, your local patch, or even further afield. I think, it's that will inspire you. Don't worry about the words too much. Little ideas will come, and little nuggets will form. And I think, that's the best thing. And just to not just look, but properly notice. And I think the readings that you've heard this evening, people have really noticed, rather than just looking at something. And just it's also a great way to slow yourself down, by properly noticing and not just looking. I can imagine that people probably tripping up over you on Croydon's pavements, Amanda, as you stop to look. But it's that looking, isn't it, and that noticing, that really brings a piece of writing to life.
Definitely.
And you can do an awful lot of writing when you're walking. Ideas come to you as you're sort of walking along, and I'm not very good because I don't take a notepad or a dictation or anything. I think I sort of hope that I'm going to remember it, and I usually do manage to remember some of it. What about you, Amanda?
Well, it'll be the things that I always drone on about in workshops very repetitively, which is exactly Vanessa's point, and yours, Jane, about writing from experience, that it's being there in the moment and capturing what you get from that experience of enjoying nature. So that would be start from experience. I would say if you want particularly if you're going to share your writing with other people, I would really encourage people to spend twice as much time editing as they do the actual writing. So tempting to write off a piece and then think, yeah, that's done. And I'm guilty of that, as everybody else is. But go back and look at it another day and polish it and polish it and polish it. Even if it's only 10 words, it's worth polishing. So I would definitely say that, and also to make every word count. So, you know, particularly if you're doing short form nature writing, make sure that there's no word in there that you think, I don't really need that word. And I'm quite often find when I'm writing things to a fixed word count, you know, so if it's a 1,000-word article, I'll write 1,200 words, and then I'll go through the whole thing, pruning. And that process means that you can kind of distill you're sort of forced to distill your thoughts and to become much more articulate in what you're trying to get across. And, you know, and I get sort of wedded to little phrases and I think, no, this is just take that out, park it somewhere else and use it for something else because I don't need to have it in here. So yeah, so it's,
if Elle was here, I think I've been on one of her workshops, and I think what she would say is she would say write from the gut, then write from the head, and then write from the heart.
Oh, lovely.
Which I thought was a really lovely...
Which I just think sums Elle up, her eloquence in being able to just, yeah, perfect, wonderful. So I've seen a couple of questions. So there was one question which said, well, I think this was when I was talking about having ideas at 4 o'clock in the morning, but have I tried using a notebook by the bed? I have tried that, but my problem is my other half, I think, would be rather freaked out by the scratch of a pencil in the middle of the night. I think it could be quite eerie, but it's a good idea, of course. So yeah,
I have one by my bed.
That's the only thing that's stopping me do that. And then we had a more general question from Nicola. She asked, what have we got from the MA? So perhaps if we could each think of one thing. So if it's not already become evident, the three of us all did the MA in Nature and Travel Writing at Bath Spa. Vanessa's still doing it. Jane and I are about to graduate next week. And it's been a formative experience for all of us. And there's several other people on the course who have either done it or are doing it. Hi, all of you. So can I have one thing from both of you? Vanessa, do you want to start? Something you've got from it?
It's just been an absolute gift. In as much as I didn't, you know, it almost feels a bit self-indulgent to allow yourself the time to actually do nature writing. And it's just having that permission to do it, I think. And it's just been, whilst, you know, I'm not saying it's all been plain sailing, and, you know, I've dealt with writer's block and long COVID and all of those things, but actually the joy of doing something that you love and spending time in nature is something I love. And so, yeah, it's just having, you know, it's just having the time. And I don't think there's going to be I think I'll be sad when it finishes this year, because, you know, I feel like that gift of time I'm not going to have that again in the same way. And I just think it's a real privilege that I've been able to do that. And it has built my confidence, because I'd never done anything like this before until I'd done the MA, and I gave up my job and enrolled and thought, what the hell am I doing? I don't even know if I can do this. So it has built, you know, it has also built confidence that I'm not a complete fraud, and, you know, it's a work in progress. But
what about you, Jane?
I think totally agree with Vanessa that it gives you that time that you don't necessarily give to yourself when you're not doing a sort of a full-on course. But I also loved the feedback from the other students. So I got an awful lot from that. There we had a sort of a small group of us who used to call it critique, but it wasn't really critique. We were sort of all quite nice about each other's stuff, but we were honest. And it was just lovely having that trust in other people that you could get that feedback about what you'd written.
Absolutely.
What about you, Amanda? What are you missing? I'm missing it dreadfully.
Well, yeah, having been thrown back into the sort of real world has been quite a shock, obviously. But I mean, what I've really loved is exactly as you said, it's the relationships we've built up with the other people on the course. And because it's a distance learning course, those people live all over Britain. In fact, in our cohort, we had a chap who lived in Toronto. And so it's building up sort of supportive relationships with other writers. I mean, I've talked already this evening about that community of nature writers out there, and how, you know, how it's an amazing community of supportive people. But yes, it was that, you know, multiplied on the course, and I've really enjoyed that.
Yeah, definitely. It's just and you meet so many people from so many different backgrounds and walks of life with different experiences, and you know, we've all got the same thing in common, which is we love the natural world and being outside. And yeah, it's just wonderful to form those relationships that you'd otherwise never in a million years have come across these people. So it's been brilliant.
So sadly, we're coming to the end of this evening. The last question I wanted to answer was, somebody said, well, what will I do with the recording? So that will be posted on my YouTube channel, which I will send you all out the link to, if anybody who'd like to, and that's where all my workshops are as well, also all funded by the Arts Council. But before we close tonight's event, I just wanted to thank Vanessa and Jane for your contributions and support, which stretch far beyond this actual evening. So you know, just what a joy it is getting to know you both. And I wanted to say a huge thank you and respect to all our other contributing writer readers. It's absolutely wonderful having the chance to share in your beautiful writing. And finally, to you, our audience of tonight, thank you so much for joining us this evening and being such a fantastic and supportive audience. It's been a pleasure having you here, and hopefully some of you have been inspired to either read some more nature writing, or do some nature writing, or take your nature writing to the next level. And that would be wonderful if that's what we managed to achieve. So it's been absolutely lovely. So thank you so much, all of you, and have a lovely rest of your evening. So good night.
Thank you, Amanda, as well, for putting on these events. They've just been really helpful and supportive.
It's a pleasure. It's the most fun thing I do. Good night, everybody.